Welcome. I'm Phil Cornish, and I'm your host for a program we call Cornish Talks Common Sense. Thank you for being with us. We've done a number of programs so far talking about a number of issues that are central to our society today. Controversies you hear about in the news, media, that are happening every day that shape the way we live and shape the way we think about ourselves and our society. This program is going to talk about hard issues, issues that are controversial, issues that are distorted and falsified by many of the mainstream media and need to be called out. I've rested our perspective on three core principles that I've talked about in past programs. I'm going to recapture them just really quickly for you. So the first of those was the advent of postmodernism, the idea that we no longer have clear, objective truth values in our society. There's no longer right or wrong or true or false. But this idea deriving from Jacques Derrida and his theories of deconstructionism and postmodernism tell us that your truth is subjective. Your truth is your own. You can believe what you want, and what's right or wrong for you is what's important. And this is a dangerous philosophy that pervades our society today, the view of postmodernism. The second point I want to touch on is the idea of the elevation of feelings. And that is the idea that feelings have now come to dominate human conduct and behavior. In debate, in social interaction, in all areas of life, feelings have been elevated over critical, rational thinking to become the dominant perspective. And this is a way of thinking that really has developed from the progress of psychiatry since the early 1900s and has shaped our thinking that says that, we ought to have good self-esteem about ourselves, and how we perceive ourselves and think about ourselves is the most important thing for us. So how we feel at the moment is the key to our human thinking and behavior. The third area I want to touch on is the idea that God is involved in the progression of human history has now been cast aside and abandoned. This idea, which we call eschatology, is now dismissed by intellectuals, by the elite today, who tell us that God's irrelevant. We're on our own, and the idea that there is a plan that God actually has for mankind is simply irrelevant and distorted. And so that's why, for example, we have ideas like climate change that have become to be so central in our society today, in the science community, in governments and non-governmental organizations that tell us that, hey, we better shape up as humans and fix our climate, or we're going to be gone in a short number of years. Well, this is all premised on human ideas that discounts, firstly, that God exists, discount that really God's in charge and humans aren't, and the idea that we can be wise enough to fix our climate problems, to heal our planet, and this short-sighted thinking is something that has manifested itself powerfully in recent years in ways that is shaping our policies, government decision-making, in ways that are shaping our society today. So these are the underlying premises that shape issues such as climate change and gender dysphoria that we've talked about, and other areas of debate that are occurring in society today. I want to talk to you about one more of those today, and that's the idea of abortion. And abortion is a timely subject because right now it's in the news every day, especially since the very recent leaking of a draft judgment of the Supreme Court Judge Samuel Alito, that suggests that the Supreme Court of the United States may be prepared to turn back the law founded in the Roe v. Wade case in 1973 and change the direction of the permissibility of abortion going forward. This is an important social issue and one that has captured the attention of the media and much of society today. So we're seeing protests happening all across the United States, protests that are even supporting picketing judges' homes, which is something that is leading us into dangerous new territory where an independent branch of government, our court system, is being threatened by bullying and by tactics that should self-evidently be seen as completely wrong-headed and inappropriate and dangerous to the rule of law and to the orderly functioning of society. If we can't accept that the highest court of the land in the United States, in this case, pronounces on what the law is, and we say that we know better and that we as citizens know better than what the court can do, we're heading for dangerous ground that is going to lead to the unraveling of the rule of law as we know it. So let me talk a little bit about this issue and give you again some historical precedent that is often not heard in the mainstream media. So Roe v. Wade. People have mostly heard about the case of Roe v. Wade, a 1973 decision of the United States Supreme Court, a case that has implications in Canada and implications in countries in other places of the world. So it was a important, new, groundbreaking decision by the Supreme Court in 1973. But was it based in sound law? And I'm going to tell you that it was not. And there are a number of authors who have written about this issue. John Noonan is one author, and there are others who have talked about the shaky ground of Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was, again, an invented case. What I mean by that is this. Persons who supported abortion rights that had not existed in the 1970s found a woman named Norma McCorvey and basically founded an agenda for her to contest abortion rights. And so they promoted her and her case up the rungs of the U.S. legal system, ultimately arriving in the Supreme Court, where the majority of that court found that pursuant to a previously non-existent right of privacy, abortion rights for women would now be validated. The prior history to that is found nowhere in the United States Constitution, was read into the 14th Amendment through a right of privacy that had never existed in that way before, was not addressed by the framers of the Constitution, and which created out of whole cloth a new law. A case that preceded Roe v. Wade called Griswold in Connecticut had talked about contraceptive rights, and from that case, the Supreme Court developed this notional right of privacy that led to their finding that women had a constitutional right to an abortion. Well, let's talk about what that meant. Back in the early 70s, not a lot was understood about the human fetus. Medical equipment and ability to view a fetus, such as we can now through ultrasound and other techniques, didn't exist back then. And so the idea that was behind the promotion of abortion rights is that the human fetus really was probably one of two things. Either it was part of the woman's body, or it was simply not human. It was something else. Let's talk about that. Let's deal with the first one. Science clearly tells us that the human fetus is a separate entity from the mother. The mother hosts the fetus in her body, but the fetus is a separate entity. The fetus was you and I at one point. Every one of us was a fetus at one point. And medical science, common sense, tells us that it is a separate entity from the mother, not something that is just part of the mother's being. But people have falsified that idea and suggested that it should be the mother. It's her body, my choice. You've heard that slogan, and that should govern. Well, we need to understand that there's responsibility in carrying a child. And I'm going to use a different term for it, a pre-born child. The idea of a fetus is a made-up word that should no longer be used and should never have been used. Where does fetus come from? Fetus comes from the Latin. And I remember a powerful presentation by a former American politician named Alan Keyes, who made this observation. You know, why do we call the preborn child in utero a fetus? Is it because Latin is a dead language? And so dead baby, dead language? Think about where the word fetus comes from and how it's used. A fetus is a misapplied term that gives a false impression of what happens. A preborn child in the mother's body is a unique creature. Every one of us had that place at one point, that we were a preborn human child in our mothers. So the idea that abortion should be supported simply on the basis that a fetus should be under the control of a mother is misplaced. This is a false issue of women's rights and women's choice. Women have a great responsibility that has been provided to them to be host uniquely to children. That is a unique created function that we would believe was endowed by God to women in giving birth to children and in ensuring their gestation. And only in recent years, with the advent of feminism and the sexual revolution, has abortion taken on a constitutional right that suggests that the woman's right should supersede the rights of our children. This is a false notion that cannot be supported. Also, the idea that I mentioned that a human preborn child is really not human at all is completely illogically and inappropriately contended by abortionists. Obviously, we understand that a preborn child is not some kind of other entity. It is not a giraffe. It is not a toy. It is not anything other than a human, unique life. So to suggest that the human preborn child is not worthy of life, that it is something other than human life, is a complete falsehood, a narrative that has been contrived to support the right of abortion and is completely wrong-headed. So a preborn human life in the mother is nothing other than human life. It's not even just potential life. It is human life. It is you. It is me. It is every one of us that was a preborn child at one point. And it is not just the mother who has this unique special role as a host to this child. and needs it needs to be recognized that a human life in the mother has a unique right of its own to birth that should not be cast aside simply because of lifestyle or other issues of the mother that are thrown up to argue for supporting abortion. And we need to understand that a civilization that aborts its own offspring cannot continue to survive and function as a healthy society. There have been more than 50 million abortions since 1973 in the United States alone. 50 million lives lost. And today, the replacement rate, the birth rate in North America is not enough to support the replacement rate for children going forward, and yet we've aborted 50 million people, 50 million unique individuals that have been denied life. And we're not having a birth rate now that will even support the continuance of the human race going forward at the rate it's happening. It makes no logical or common sense whatsoever. And we need to understand the background to abortion rights that started with people like Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Again, a hugely powerful lobbyist in the United States that promotes the idea of abortion without society understanding that its history with Margaret Sanger is founded in eugenics. What is eugenics? Eugenics is the idea that those babies who are not fit to live should just be disposed of as disposable goods. The idea that persons maybe with disabilities like Down syndrome or some other ailment ought not to be given the opportunity for life. Eugenics tells us that it is a horribly conceived idea that persons who don't warrant life can simply be disposed of. And it has had a predominant effect on the black race, where the majority of people who have been aborted are blacks. And people need to come to grips and understand, people from Black Lives Matter, that their children have been aborted, and that is the most fundamental right that should be promoted by Black Lives Matter. And sadly is not. So the history of abortion derives from principles of eugenics. It's driven also by a name I mentioned to you before, Michel Foucault, this French philosopher who has driven the idea of people claiming rights and asserting rights as being oppressed people. And the history of Michel Foucault is not one that you ought to be proud to be associated with. His end was as a person who died of AIDS, promiscuously engaging in sexual behavior at Toronto bathhouses and other places where he both became infected with the AIDS virus and gave it to others. And that is the legacy of Michel Foucault, a person who has driven much of feminist and other rights today, and has led us into a morass of devastation. So the idea that the human preborn child is not a human individually created life is a falsehood. And the idea that an unwanted child should just be conveniently aborted like we throw away disposable goods is a tragic notion to say that there are unwanted children out there. This is a function, again, of human emotion and feeling to believe that you don't need a child at this time, or your life is too complicated or too demanding at this time to support a child. This kind of illusory thinking is leading to the devastation of our civilization at a huge cost of life. And it ought not to be countenanced. And now the right of abortion has become so powerful that protesters now are protesting. Judges, as I've said, they are becoming increasingly radicalized and violent. And it is going to lead to the fracturing of our society in a way that will wreak devastation. Abortion is something that needs to be looked at with care and to be understood fundamentally as a right to life. Thank you for listening. We'll hope to be back again.